Just to make sure that we are all on the same page, let us just clarify that the temple of God refers to the house or dwelling of God. As we have seen, we as Christians are the living stones that make up the spiritual house or temple of God in the new covenant.
The church does not refer to a building, but to a particular type of assembly of those who are of the household of God. There are Christians that know that the church refers to an assembly of believers and not a building, yet confuse the fact that there is a difference between a synagogue and a church.
Now, it's true that both a synagogue and a church refers to assemblies, but the meaning of each word in biblical times were quite different in nature. Let us try and explain this by explaining some Greek words for an assembly. Should you want to look at some of these Greek words for yourself, please make use of some Greek dictionaries that describe the actual understanding of biblical times, like the Greek lexicon or Vines, or similar scholar Greek dictionaries. The Strong's Dictionary only translates words into its current English meaning and is not meant to be used to interpret original meaning of the text.
The word synagogue comes from the Greek word synago, which entails an assembly of people brought together from those who were scattered. After the Temple of Solomon was destroyed and the Jews were scattered among the nations, the Jews came together in small groups where they continued being taught by the law of Moses and the instructions of the prophets. The synagogue gathering helped them not to forsake their heritage as a nation, even though they were scattered all over the world without a temple. To the Jews, the synagogue was a kind of religious school, similar to a Bible study or a Sunday school. It was never seen by the Jews as a temple or place of worship at that time.
Keep in mind though that synagogue only meant bringing together scattered people or things. For that reason the word synagogue was sometimes used when it refers to bringing the church together. Yet the word synagogue never referred to the actual church gathering. In other words, synagogue was never used to mean church, but only that the church was brought together or assembled, as seen in Matthew chapter 18 verse 20. For where 2 or 3 are gathered together, or synagogue, in my name, I am there in the midst of them. Another example, James chapter 2 verse 2. For there should come into your assembly, or synagogue, a man with gold rings in fine apparel, and there should also come in a poor man in filthy clothes.
There are other Greek words that also refer to an assembly, but are not as commonly known. For instance, the Greek word pletos, which refers to the general gathering of people for no particular purpose as such. It just refers to a common gathering of people for any type of gathering. For instance, in Acts chapter 23 verse 7, and when they had said this, a dissension arose between the Pharisees and the Sadducees, and the assembly, pletos, was divided.
Another is the Greek word sostrophe, literally meaning a twisting together, generally referring to a crowd or a riot. For instance, in Acts chapter 19 verse 40, for we are in danger of being called into question for today's uproar, there being no reasons which we may give to account for this disorderly gathering, sostrophe.
The next Greek word is panigyrus. This word is more interesting in that it was used to describe an assembly that was spectator-orientated in nature. This word was used to describe the Greek Olympics gathering, or religious gatherings. It was used to indicate religious gatherings because most of the people who gathered were spectators to the ritual performance of the priests up front. They might participate in prayer or bring something forward to be sacrificed, but for the majority of the time, they were spectators in a religious show. This word was used in a prophetic and spiritual sense of the church in Hebrews chapter 12 and verse 22, right up to verse 23. But you have come to Mount Zion and to the city of the living God, the heavenly Jerusalem, to an innumerable company of angels, to the general assembly, panagyrus, and church, ekklesia, of the firstborn who are registered in heaven, to God the judge of all, to the spirits of just men made perfect.
You would think that looking at today's church, the word church came from this Greek word panagyrus. For instance, if we go into most so-called church gatherings today, we enter a spectator-orientated religious show, where we hardly participate except for maybe singing songs and giving money. Unfortunately, neither of these Greek words for gathering was ever used to refer to mean the church or the church meeting in the Bible.
At last, we have come to an actual Greek word for church, which is ekklesia. This is a combination of 2 words, ek, which means out of, and klesia, which means called. Literally, it can be translated as called out or elect. Yet the word ekklesia means much more than an assembly of the elect of Christ. The word ekklesia actually indicated a judicial meeting. Both the Greeks and the Romans used the Greek word ekklesia to refer to a meeting where people were called out to discuss and make decisions concerning the affairs of the state. The judicial meetings were attended for the stability of the state and advancement of the current kingdom.
What is really interesting was the word ekklesia was never used by the Greeks or by the Romans to indicate a religious or an informal gathering. Would you be surprised to learn that not even the Bible used the word ekklesia to mean a religious meeting?
To demonstrate this, we need to look at an incident found in Acts chapter 19. Before we read this passage, let us just give you some context to the passage, which you can verify in Acts chapter 19 verses 24 up to verses 31. Demetrius, a silversmith, was offended by the new beliefs Paul brought to Asia, which entailed turning away from idol worship towards faith in Christ. It had drastic financial implications to Demetrius and other silversmiths who had made these idols for profit. Demetrius got a whole mob together at the theatre to make a decision about what they were going to do about this.
Let us look at what happened from this point on in Acts chapter 19, verse 32 right up to verse 41. Some therefore cried one thing and some another, for the assembly, the Greek word ekklesia, was confused, and most of them did not know why they had come together. And they drew Alexander out of the multitude, the Jews putting him forward. And Alexander motioned with his hands and wanted to make his defense to the people. But when they found out that he was a Jew, all with one voice cried out for about 2 hours, "Great is Diana of the Ephesians." And when the city clerk had quieted the crowd, he said, "Men of Ephesus, what man is there who does not know that the city of Ephesians is temple guardian of the great goddess Diana, and of the image which fell down from Zeus? Therefore, since these things cannot be denied, you ought to be quiet and do nothing rashly. For you have brought these men here who are neither robbers of temples nor blasphemers of your goddess. Therefore, if Demetrius and his fellow craftsmen have a case against anyone, the courts are open and there are proconsuls. Let them bring charges against one another. But if you have any other inquiry to make, it shall be determined in the lawful assembly." Again, the Greek word ekklesia. "For we are in danger of being called into question for today's uproar, there being no reasons which we may give an account for this disorderly gathering." The Greek word sostrophe. And when he had said these things, he dismissed the assembly. Once again, the Greek word ekklesia.
Here we find the Greek word ekklesia being used 3 times to indicate the type of assembly that the silversmith Demetrius called for. It is also why the city clerk questioned the lawfulness of this particular ekklesia gathering, as it became a sostrophe, which, as we saw earlier on, meant riot. Would you say that this ekklesia meeting was intended to be a judicial meeting? Well, yes, because the intention was to decide what they were going to do with Paul and the influence he had on the idol worship industry of the city. It was only when they were shouting praises to the idol of Diana that the secretary came to bring order to the ekklesia gathering. Don't you think that this questioning of the ekklesia order says something about many church gatherings of today?